Hey, welcome to the Social 333 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bentley. Today I have Carla Hanes. Carla,
Hey, Chris. Pleasure to be here.
thank you. Carla, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Carla Hanes, as Chris said. I'm originally from Hawaii. Grew up there. My parents run a nonprofit and do a lot of different things, but they work primarily with feeding the hungry and also traveling to lots of fabulous foreign countries and taking surfers in, and grew up in that environment, and do a lot of humanitarian work. And my husband and I live here now in the Dallas area. We've lived here for about 7 years, and 3 boys, 2 in college and 1 still in high school.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you work a lot with like identity, purpose. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think that really sort of came about very organically in the sense that I grew up with parents who traveled and spoke, and then married into a family with a mother-in-law who also does that. But I think the topic of identity was something that I grew up around because there was this there was a heartbeat of the organization that they worked for and then the one that they created. And it was a lot about knowing who you were in order to have the impact you were created to have on the world. And to me, identity is sort of the central piece of leaving the impact and legacy that you were meant to leave, and also just living a life that's fulfilling. So
That's interesting because I go through identity crisis sometimes and I like forget about, who I am or like what I'm doing, and kind of like as an entrepreneur, you look at different things
yeah.
and you kind of like never go back to really your identity. I know as I got older, I kind of figured out, who I was. This isn't going to change. I got to play the best what I got, which is like, they always talk about having like, whatever cards you have,
Yes.
playing those cards, right? So with identity and people that are struggling with identity or maybe changing their identity, is there like some tools or some things that you can kind of recommend to some people that are looking to do something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of work with college age because that tends to be the time that we're discovering who we are better and out on our own, kind of making decisions. And so I think what's fascinating about that is, and I've learned that, we can all hear a good talk, but without practical application, it's just that, it's a talk. So I think practical tools start with really basic things of being able to say, if somebody came up to you and asked you, hey, give me 3 words that you would use to describe yourself. And doing that with yourself in a journal format and talking about, wow, what do I actually believe about myself without spending hours thinking about it? What are the things that just come to you off the top of your head? And then looking at those and saying, wow, what does that say about what I believe about myself? And then what do I allow to inform my decision about who I am? And so much of that is a daily habit of, this is what I believe to be true about myself. These are the things I want to change. And so here's the replacement for these lies I believe about myself or things that I want to change. And I think just doing a daily, especially in the beginning, doing it daily and asking yourself, and if you use a negative word to define yourself, then finding the opposite of that word and implementing that on a daily basis.
That's one of the things that I was going to talk to you about is the identity and rebuilding it. So like, I think a lot of people, what they do is they get away from their foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think I've talked about it on the show multiple times. I'm in therapy. So one of the questions, and I just had a session yesterday, was, like, where are you going in terms of your foundation, right? So we all kind of are tethered, right? And kind of imagine that ball, like, going around. So it's just like you're tethered to that foundation. And then you can go outside of the foundation to kind of like look around and do whatever. But going back to your foundation is really it. And I've kind of found that out to be, especially with my identity. I can go out and do different things, be a different person, whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm still that foundational piece. I still go back to that foundation. Have you seen that a lot? I'm sure you have with like college age individuals, where they just, they're used to maybe living at home, used to doing a certain thing, used to believing one thing, used to accepting one thing about themselves, especially if they're into like sports,
Mhm.
because you get into high school athletes and then they're like really thinking they're the best, and then they get into college and they're like, whoa, hang on a second, right? So talk a little bit about that. Like, does somebody that you speak about, or somebody that in a stage situation, or maybe a one-on-one, like somebody that is struggling, that is maybe getting away from their foundation and needs to kind of get pulled back, whether it be a religious situation like we are talking about
Mhm.
Christianity, or maybe just a guy on guy conversation like, hey, bro, like you need to really check yourself, right?
Sure. Yeah, I think that there's so many layers of identity, but when I boil it down, it gets to the real bottom line for me is we're all products of our environment. And what can happen with that is if you grew up in a great environment with parents who knew who they were and were speaking identity over you, like, hey, you're great, the world's your oyster, fulfill every desire in your heart, that kind of thing, that significantly shapes children and affects who they are as adults, affects who they marry, and then how they parent. And so it's this it's very cyclical in the way that it duplicates itself. So obviously we want to get to it as early as we can, and be aware that the world is constantly trying to decide for you who you're going to be. The world is we are bombarded by identity. Be this, be that. If you want to be successful, it means you have to check these boxes. And really, I think having a healthy identity comes back to, at the core of who I am, what do I believe to be true about myself? Not because someone else believes it, but what do I believe? And for me, that goes back to faith. I can't separate my identity from my faith, because if I believe that someone greater than myself created me with a purpose and with a passion and in his image, then for me, the final authority on who I am is him. And so I think that's sort of how we get back to, it's at the end of the day, not about my accomplishments. It's not about my job, because think about it. When you meet somebody at a dinner party, one of the first things people ask is, oh, so what do you do?
Right.
It is definitely how we assign importance and value in our society. And there's totally a place for that. But if my identity is completely wrapped up in what I do, I will be very limited in doing things that don't fall in the category of my job, because to me, those won't signify success. And so I think that's where we have to know who we are, separate from all the things we can do, all the ways we're loved or not loved. At the core of who we are, what do we believe about ourselves, without anyone else chiming in or anything else sort of making that decision or informing that decision for us.
I think that's one of the biggest uh, things in sales. That's really, really difficult. I know I went through it. So I was an auto mechanic and I was working
Mm.
on cars. All I cared about was racing cars. This was before Fast and the Furious and all that stuff. We were
Okay.
doing street racing and
Yeah.
stuff, and drag racing. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And the thing that excited me was cool muscle cars and new engines and faster, whatever. And as I got kind of older, I was like, okay, well, like I'm gonna get stuck just being a mechanic. I'm gonna get stuck as being like the greasy, mechanic
Yeah.
guy, and I have to change this because where I want to go is not that.
Mm.
So I had to kind of change my identity to become not that person that crawls underneath cars, but the guy that sells $1 million homes, or aspires to sell $1 million homes at
Mhm.
the time, right? So like I had to kind of see what other people were doing, but at the core, I really still is the guy that wants to race cars and like hang out in the alley and swap engines and stuff like that. I don't really do it anymore, but that was still my core. But you can kind of change your identity
Mhm.
as long as you believe in yourself, and that's kind of like the lies and stuff too that you were talking about.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely, Chris. And I think a big part, like a key in what you said, was you still, at the heart of it, are the guy that wants to go race cars. And so for me, I think one of the greatest keys that we miss especially as we get older. So if I'm talking to people who haven't grown up in an environment where people were speaking life and speaking identity, there's a lot more layers to peel away. And what happens is we wear the words, the identity that other people gave us, and we either accept them or reject them. And the more we accept them, the more they become a part of who we are. So it becomes almost like a garment that we're wearing. But what I thought was really so key about what you said is now you're a really successful real estate agent. You're also doing a podcast, but you still have this love. And this is what I say to people. And to me, it's a practical tool. And that is, what is it that when you're doing it, you feel the most alive? Because going back to, I can't separate who I am from my faith. If the one who created me also created the universe and he has a great plan, then he knows me better than I know myself. And he created me to do things that are fulfilling. And when I'm doing what I was actually created to do, I'm most fulfilled. And that passion, that fulfillment actually informs my other decisions about my purpose. So often the thing that we love doing is something we were made to do. And it maybe isn't your 9 to 5, but it will inform your 9 to 5. It will either fuel that passion. It will be the thing you go back to when you need to feel alive again. It's not just, oh, I happen to do this or I'm a little bit talented at that. You were created to be talented at that because that's how you were created. And it speaks to something larger than ourselves. And that there's a great quote by John Piper that says, God is most glorified when we're most satisfied in him. So he is getting the glory that he intended to get when he created you, when you're doing what you were created to do. And so it's our privilege to sort of seek out, what is it that I was created to do? And I think, you can watch a million talks, TED Talks, just Google, what is my purpose? There's all kinds of books written about it. And there's so much more to unwrap there. But I think just getting to the core is, what is it that when you're doing it, you come alive? Because that speaks to something inside of you that's far greater than anything you've created.
Yeah, I've been kind of on that search because, real estate's been kind of slow. And I've been like, maybe I'll do a little bit of this, or what is it going to make me happy, or what's this, or what's that. And then I kind of realized that at the end of the day, like, I'm just going to go do whatever makes me happy. And I see with real estate agents that come in, and like new agents, and they think that just looking at houses is really cool. And that's what they want to do. And that's perfectly fine.
Right.
But you can't build a business around just being excited about looking at houses. I've hired people that they just want to go look at houses. Cool. But that's not going to make a business. And I think that's kind of dovetailing on what you're talking about. It's just, you can't have an identity like that. You can't just be like, I like this, so this is who I am. Which is not really you need to actually love and embrace that is who you are, and you can kind of make yourself into somebody, which is what I did.
Yeah.
But outside of that, at the core, it's really, you really enjoy this.
Yeah.
And you can't get away from it.
Yeah, I agree.
Talk about some habits or some tools that people may have, or you may give them to kind of stay grounded in their identity, because that's, I think, another thing that's really difficult for people. Yeah. They may be into whatever, but at the same time they're getting farther and further away, especially in faith. I see that a lot, and especially myself. I've kind of gotten away from it, and then you kind of come back to it.
Yeah.
Talk to me. Is there some tools that you use, or some things that you can kind of give to people?
Yeah.
To get them regrounded.
For sure. I think, too, as we get older, you kind of get in your rut of, well, this is my job, this is my 9 to 5. And you guys have all heard the quote that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day. So I think the people that we're most often inspired by are the people that are actually doing what they were created to do. They've found that sweet spot of, man, this is where I come alive. This is where I thrive. And so I'm going to turn this into my job. And I think at the core of it, that is sort of, you haven't missed it. You're not too late. If you find yourself in a job that you think, man, this is not what I'm not coming alive here. This is literally me surviving and not thriving. which I think is sort of a temperature that we get to check on a fairly regular basis. Am I just going through the motions? Am I finding purpose in this? Or is this just a job to check a box? Now, we'll all have to do jobs that maybe don't speak to our huge inner core purpose. But if you're doing that for your entire life, I think that's where we have to come back to what's feeding me? What am I allowing to be the center of my day? And if it's just to check a box, I'm a firm believer that everyone was put here on purpose. There was a study that said that literally there are 1 trillion options when an egg and sperm meet for that potential combination. So if you think about there being 1 trillion options and somehow, whether you believe in faith or evolution, somehow the one you came out of those 1 trillion options, that's pretty intentional. There's a reason for that. So when you look at life, it's easy to say, well, there's billions of people. Yeah, but there could be billions of different kinds of people. And we were chosen to be the kind of people that, in my opinion, were created on purpose for a purpose. So my tool comes from, man, if I was put here intentionally, then it is my joy to search out and discover why I was put here. What is my impact supposed to be? I say to my children regularly, whatever gift you were given grows larger the more you give it away. It's like that muscle that you're exercising. It gets bigger the more you exercise it. The more I give my gifting away, the larger it grows. And so it's finding that thing that, man, this is what I come alive when I'm doing. And I'm going to find a way to do this because this is the impact I believe I was meant to have. And so coming into that recognition that you very easily could not exist, and yet you do. And there's a purpose and there's a reason in that. And oh, by the way, there's never going to be another you for as long as time exists. There's never going to be another you for as long as the earth is continuing to spin. Like when we stand back and look at the significance of that, it's almost like a clarion call to say, wow, I'm going to do something with this one life. I get this one wild, crazy, beautiful life. What am I going to do with it? Because it was created on purpose. And so I think it's that regular check-in. And we've all heard the quote, comparison is the thief of joy. So it's very easy for us to be in our lane and think, oh, well, there's 50,000 people that do what I do. But there's no one that does it the exact way you do it. And that's the key, is that I believe from my life is meant to come a very specific sound that nobody else can make. They might speak on the same topic, but it's going to come through their filter. And my love for the topic of identity comes through my filter. And if I didn't do it because there's 50,000 other people doing it, then I'm missing out on leaving my imprint that I was created to make. And so it's understanding that the thing you're passionate about, A, you're passionate for a reason, and B, nobody can do it the way that you do it. That's a very specific gifting to you. I have identical twins, and they're actually mirror twins, which makes them the most identical that twins can be. Wow. So when they face each other, one has everything that goes to the right-handed, their hair parts to the right. On the same day when they were 4 months old, their opposite eye teeth came in. I mean, like crazy stuff that I didn't even know existed until I had them. And as identical as they are, they don't have the same fingerprint. Wow. Like there's an intentionality about that. There's something distinct that's meant to come from our lives. And it's our job and our joy to sort of be intentional about figuring that out on a daily basis.
I agree. And then building a company, well, I like building companies, right? So like building a company around your gift, I think is really it. Steve Harvey talks about, becoming a millionaire, right? And how do you become a millionaire? By doing what your gift is. Your gift may be cutting grass, maybe baking pies, maybe whatever it is. And he talks about different people that do that and they're millionaires and all they do is bake pie or cut grass.
Yeah.
So it's wild that you can, just do your gift and be happy. Wake up every day happy and just go do it and be a millionaire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Carla, if somebody were to try to get in touch with you, where would they go?
Carla Hanes on Instagram is a great way. I'm good about checking it and getting back to DMs and that kind of thing. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Carla, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.